First, I would like to remind you that our next webinar, which we do quarterly, would be September 14. September 14, that is a Thursday. By my time, 9 a.m., which is instant time in the US. So I don't know how that translates where you are. So please put that on your diary, September 14, Thursday, at 9 a.m. here. You'll get a reminder, certainly, and also get more information about our next speaker. Good. So a few housekeeping announcements before I have the pleasure to introduce our guest today. First, I would like to thank all of you who have responded to our EAR survey. You've been harassed by reminders, from Nelly and Unebudo, but we are happy that the harassment, produced some fruit. But this is a reminder to those who are yet to fill in the survey. We just like to encourage you to do so. Again, we cannot emphasize enough the importance of the survey, which helps us to see and to make sense of the impact of the Nagel grants in the past few years. And it will be great to really hear your voice and be frank and real in feeling that. In actual fact, because of the recent response, we are even deciding that we might do a raffle draw, and those who win will have the presents they will never forget in life. So if you are either a grantee or a facilitator or a friend of Nagel Institute, please, if you didn't receive the original email, let us know, and then we would provide the link for the survey. So I would like, on this note, to thank Nelly and Unebudo both for facilitating this webinar series, but also the survey too. So I know that I'm sure our speaker is already saying, yes, I will fill out the survey. Thank you. All right. Some of you may not know, a lot of good things are happening. So let me share one or two of the several good things that has happened recently. You may remember that for a couple of months, the position of the Nagel director was vacant because our colleague had to change chairs and moved to Norway. But I am very delighted to announce that that chair has been filled, is no longer empty, and the one who has occupied that chair now is one of our own. So I'm very pleased to announce, for those who have not heard, that Professor Damaris Pasitao is now the Nagel director, even though at the moment she's working from Kenya. We're looking forward to her joining Nelly in Grand Rapids. So I think we can give her a hand offering if it's possible. Welcome, Damaris.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so one last housekeeping. As we will use the same structure as in other webinar events we've had, I would have the possibility to, pose questions to our guests, and then which will be very interactive, and we will do that as long as the spirit leads. and then we would move to a second segment, which will be opened up to you to interact with our guest speaker, ask questions or comments. If you are shy to let us see your face, you could also post your question, and we would endeavor to read that. Okay, so enough of that. Nelly, Nabudo, any quick housekeeping? Okay, all right, good. So it's my great pleasure at this time to introduce a dear colleague and friend who, is also very well known within the Nagel family, who has been a recipient of the Nagel grant, and she's one of those who has used it well. And by the time we have this conversation, you will understand exactly why you'll get quite a lot of inspiration. And I think I would like to start on a very hot news, that Professor Nadine Bowers Du-Toit very recently had just returned from South Korea, an international conference where she has been elected as the current president of the International Academy of Practical Theology. And I think I just want to start on that note. Professor Nadine Bowers Du-Toit. And let me now say a few things about her, and we'll then give her the floor afterwards. Professor Nadine Bowers Du-Toit is professor in Theology and Development in the Department of Practical Theology and Missiology at the Faculty of Theology, University of Stellenbosch. Previous to her appointment at the faculty, she served as the acting dean, head of Department of Community Development, and director of Student Affairs, respectively, at Cornerstone Institute, which was then Cornerstone Christian College. As the child of Pentecostal clergy, Damaris, I'm sure you like to hear that, who were actively involved in community. Her Doctor of Theology in Practical Theology in 2005 focused on the role of the local church as an agent of change in addressing poverty. Her research over the past 20 years has therefore largely focused on the role of faith communities in addressing the intersecting issues of poverty, inequality, race, and gender. Her most recent projects, which investigated the role of faith identity of faith-based organizations and the issue of young adults, race, faith, and inequality, have been funded by grants from the National Research Foundation and the Nagel Institute, respectively. Professor Bowers Du-Toit has published over 45 articles and book chapters, and has more recently edited a book volume entitled Faith, Race, and Inequality Among Young Adults in South Africa, Contested and Contesting Discourses for a Better Future. This was published by Sun Media 2022. She has supervised a combined 25 PhD and master students to completion. Besides lecturing, publishing, and supervising postgraduate students, she is often invited to address congregations, church leaders, and faith-based organizations on topics pertaining to community development and social justice. And I think her project within Nagel, where she served as the grantee, actually exemplifies this research expertise that she has. So she sees herself as an activist academic I'm going to push her on that to explain what that means and how to do it. Always seeking to push for space for more voices to be heard and served as the chair of the transformative committee within the Faculty of Theology for a number of years. Nadine is the director of the Unit for Religion and Development and serves on the boards of several non-governmental organizations, including the Warehouse, FESANE, and the Alliance for Inclusive Development. She previously served as the chairperson of the Society of Practical Theology South Africa. And we are so delighted that she is risen from being chair in South Africa to being chair internationally. And just before I asked her to come in, I cannot forget the hospitality we received in Cape Town, where Nadine and others hosted us. This is also telling me come back to Stellenbosch and Cape Town very soon. So on that note, I would like to welcome you to our webinar. And
thank you, Afi.
Yes, and so I would like to start off perhaps on a very provocative note, but let's make this as interactive as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. So my first question would be, who is Nadine?
Well, you heard in the opening, I think, practical theologians, we have to position ourselves. We're familiar with that. And I was saying to my parents more recently, the older I get, the more I am so aware that my theology is very much shaped by how I've been raised. So as a PK, as a pastor's kid, and then as you heard also in my bio, a pastor's kid who had parents who worked in very impoverished communities and who were actively engaged, yes, in the tent campaigns, but just as much in the social welfare, community development aspects as you would know it today. So much of how I engage, think, what I'm interested in, I think is very much shaped by my background. My parents were also church leaders during apartheid and were very vocally anti-apartheid. So when you talk about the social justice aspect of it, then that was what I was raised in, and I guess with mother's milk, imbibing mother's milk, you begin to find yourself when you're in new spaces, maybe doing some of those same things in different ways. It's a different time. But I think that shapes a big part of who I am. Maybe also interesting to say, I studied at Stellenbosch University in the 1990s. So I'm what we would call the rainbow generation kid. So just after democracy in South Africa, I would become a university student. And at that stage, University of Stellenbosch is a historically white university. PS for the Africans that think I'm white, I'm not. In South Africa, I would maybe be mixed. And so I was one of the first people of color, students of color at undergraduate level. Also a Pentecostal, also English, it was Afrikaans University. So some of those things I think shapes my scholarship. It just cannot be removed from the experiences that we have in life. And of course, as time goes on, that changes too and gets stimulated by other people and things. I'm also married to Andres, and we have one daughter, and we live in a very African way, in an extended family household. In fact, this is the house that I grew up in, a lot bigger than the one I grew up in. But we actually live in the area that I grew up in, together with my parents and family. So that's a bit more. You'll have to push me more if you want to hear more.
Thank you, Nadine, for that introduction. Yes, I don't want to invade your private space, so I would change gears and maybe move to talking about your general experiences with Nagel, and maybe just to kickstart that, I would perhaps ask you to talk about your specific project and your theme. You know, what years were you involved with Nagel? Who were your collaborators in crime? You know, perhaps also how did you navigate the several hurdles? You know, in composing your team and working together. Then I will follow up with, you know, the history of your working with that team.
Sure. So interestingly enough, we heard about it from a South African who lives in Canada. And he said, hey, there's this project. I think that you guys, you know, you might be interested in this kind of funding. And when we looked at it, it was very much, you know, it was very appealing to us. And we put together a team. I think there's one that is not a theologian, she's a sociologist, Dr. Lisa LaRue, working at the Unit for Religion and Development Research, but then a public theologian, my colleague Dion Foster, my colleague Chantal Weber, who is also online today in youth work. By the way, she's the president of the International Society for Youth Work, and then also students. And maybe if you can ask me a little bit more about the student involvement. They came a little bit later, but they became very central to what we were doing in this particular project. So I actually had to pull up our research question. It's a very clumsy one. Colleagues, please don't make research questions that sound like this. It was, so we looked at the lived realities of inequality in South Africa, and particularly its impact on lived theologizing and political agency of young adults. In South Africa, young adults are defined very broadly. In some of your own countries, it may differ. In our country, 18 to 35s. How did young adults, Christian young adults more specifically, how do they understand, conceptualize, theologize around issues of injustice and inequality? And for those that don't know, South Africa is one of the most unequal, if not the most unequal country in the world. We have the highest Gini coefficient. I believe it's us and Brazil that fight for that dubious honor each year. And in 2018, the World Bank even featured us, some of you may remember, on the cover of Time magazine. And it was around that time, I think 2017, 2018, that we were applying for Nagel funding under the sub-theme of, I think it was forgiveness. And what I really appreciated about Nagel was that you saw the broader scope of the project. You weren't specifically looking at forgiveness as maybe some people would understand it, but within its broader framework. So that was our project. And the collaborators, I think having colleagues who were theologians, but in overlapping fields. So youth, with regards to young adults, public theology is definitely a key component of our project. I'm a practical theologian and I work with the poverty, inequality, race stuff. And then having the sociologist who could also assist us with some of the, sharpen our methodological lenses. And the lived religion part and push within Nagel, I think really appealed to us as public and practical theologians. So that was quite exciting. And we worked hard, as everybody does, to get their proposals in. But it was just such an exciting project, which we still talk about today in terms of the fruits that it produced and the opportunities that this whole being part of this cohort provided.
No, thank you, Nadine. Yeah, perhaps you could talk a little bit about the messy business of actually choosing. Yeah, because it's not simply a question, oh, well, let me put together my friends, into this. So how did you go about, selecting this, what became a very productive team?
So I think what really helped was that in the faculty, we have the Beyers-Naudé Center for Public Theology. And then we have my unit, which is Religion and Development. So in a way, it wasn't as messy as one would expect it to be. The messiness came later during our data collection. And you can tell me if I must talk about that. But I think initially we had quite a solid team. And the dean, who is also a youth work specialist, the new dean came in just as we'd received the grant. And that was also quite interesting because he took such an intense interest in it that he joined the team. The students also became a core part of it. So initially, you know, typical academics, we're in charge, we're running the project. And very soon it became evident, this is the messy part too, very soon it became evident that, you know, we talk about in South Africa, maybe other countries, nothing about us without us. So as PI, I had to think about, if we're doing a project on young adults, how could we not include young adults in this particular project and forefront them and their development? So one of the key things early on that we were very clear about is, how do we grow our own timber even through this process? How do we stimulate young students of ours who have potential, particularly students of color, to be engaged in this project and have opportunity to grow as academics within this particular project? And in many ways, they challenged us quite openly. You know, power is something very important to note in academia. Sometimes we're not self-reflexive enough about it. But I'm so pleased that the students were. And where we were dominating as the professors, they would call us to order and say, look, this is missing, that is missing. They became fully integrated into the project, not only in terms of data collection, which was the initial impetus to get them involved, but also in terms of data analysis and even data dissemination. And I'm very pleased that both of the students that were significantly involved are now, one is registering for his PhD and the other one is registered for his PhD.
No, thank you. This is very interesting. I think I would like you to shed a little bit more light about the student involvement, because I think it provided a space not just to work within the project, but it became a space for mentoring.
Exactly.
And I'm quite struck that you said at times the students call you professors to order, you know, so perhaps you could even give specific examples where your team, you were engaged in exchanging blows and slaps, you know. How did you navigate that? And maybe also combine that with the whole longue durée of the project, you know, from data collection to analysis. How was role differentiation here amongst your team? Who was doing what, you know?
So I think, you know, it's very important. I think when you are the PI, colleagues do look to you. And it was obviously my job to set the pace and to keep to the deadlines. So I knew, you know, this is project management and we have to set very clear deadlines. We had quite, I think, fairly regular meetings. Chantal can come in if she wants to, but we had fairly regular meetings, of course, to get all the professors' diaries to align. We were not all professors at that point in time, but to get our diaries to align was quite interesting, but we committed to that. Bringing the dean in was another interesting factor. With the students, it initially started with, you know, it would be good to have the students do data collection and also to get students that spoke the different languages of the young adults concerned. And what I did there was train them in data collection methods. So we also spotted students who we knew had potential for further study. And who had proven themselves in terms of commitment, who both students actually did the undergraduate in youth work with Chantal, so they were grounded in the youth aspect, and both of them were then doing postgraduate studies in community development. So they had a lovely mix. And when it came to setting up, for example, the interview schedules, students were involved in interrogating that. So I would have a basic interview schedule, and then we talk about probes, and then we brainstorm some of the probes together. And they'd say, no, you couldn't ask a question like that. That doesn't make sense. Maybe we should go here, we should go there. And then in the data analysis phase and the presentation phase, in South Africa, many of you will know, unfortunately, due to the legacy of apartheid, we are still racially divided in terms of where we live and so forth. And so the project actually looked how young adults of different race groups, we know it's a construction, but in South Africa, that's how it still sometimes operates, how they understood inequality and poverty and injustice differently. And when it came to the data analysis, students were paired up with senior colleagues. So I had a student working with me on the one set of data. We had 3 case studies, and my colleague Dion Foster had a student working with him. And what was very interesting was when we came to presenting, we did a feedback workshop initially, just to test the data with people. And, typical academics, we were setting it up like all the professors and academics were the main people presenting in this workshop. And the students actually challenged us and said, no, actually, we think this is a problem. And we had to sit back and say, we're sorry, you are so right. How could we get this wrong? So, and in the end, I think that made for really, really a good feedback workshop. They did the icebreakers, they presented some of the findings together with us, and were fully engaged in that part of it as well. So also, I think the interesting thing during the data collection, data analysis phase, there was a very controversial racial study that happened at the University of Stellenbosch. And this provoked a lot of questions within the university. When I say racial, very stereotypical, also almost like eugenics, labeling people of color like myself, women of color, mentally deficient. And the whole furor that happened after that put the university ethics into a complete spin, where they were asking the question, should we even refer to race? And here we were doing a study that, partly focuses on race, which led to some very good conversations. And we didn't back off. I think it enriched what we were doing. And for us, it confirmed, actually, this is the kind of research that we should be doing. But how do we do it responsibly? How do we feedback responsibly, etc.?
No, this is fascinating, Nadine. Yes, I wish I can just let you keep, expanding on this. I'm happy that Chantal is here, and I'm sure during the Q&A, she could share additional insights. But as the PI for that project, I'm sure you would also remind her to share her views through the survey. We are really looking forward to Chantal's feedback on this. So let me go to perhaps the next question. I wanted to, forgive me, I'm trying to combine questions because I want to buy more time for Q&A.
Sure.
But I wanted to move slowly to asking you about your tangible outputs and how you went about realizing them. But maybe before you do that, could you say something about the gender divide of your project? How did that play out?
Yeah, sure. Actually, so it's interesting in terms of academic staff, there were 2 men, my dean and Dion Foster, Professor Dion Foster, and then myself, Professor Chantal Weber and Dr. Lisa Leroux, and then 2 male students. So it was fairly balanced in terms of gender. Also, race is also a very important marker in the South African context, especially when you're dealing with studies such as this. And actually, there were 2 white colleagues, and the rest of us were people of color. And that also provided interesting dynamics. I think your second question was on
yes,
the
yes.
outputs.
I wanted to talk about your tangible output.
Tangible outputs.
I
Sure.
know also your not too long ago book published, but other deliverables that you had. That will be interesting to share. Yeah.
Sure. So besides the book project, I believe there are 3 articles. The one in the journal, which was facilitated by Nagel, and then another one, actually I think one in Joel Carpenter's Festschrift that also builds on that work. And then also what was very interesting, and I love this networking. So one of the benefits for me was definitely engaging with other scholars on the continent, getting to know what they're doing, then getting to know what we're doing. And Ezra Chitanda was doing or starting to think about a book on religion and inequality in Africa. And when I presented at one of our Nagel gatherings, he said, hey, I think that's what we need for my book. So it was just fantastic, that we could collaborate a bit further and even be part of a fellow Nagel grantee's book project, which is of high standing. I mean, Ezra is a well-known scholar on the continent. So that was just fantastic. So it was some of those formal and in the book. So those are the publication outputs. But more than that, one of the outputs we promised was a short course on youth and social justice, which in the initial launch was funded by the Nagel project. At the same time, one of the students who were part of our team, he did his master's degree. So part of his master's degree was writing this youth and social justice short course, which then got rolled out after he graduated. Immediately, we rolled it out with the group to a lot of success. And Chantal actually is taking this further because we are going to hopefully have some collaboration with the US university where we're going to take this course and see if we can do a north-south type of thing, which is really exciting. So it's going further even than our continent. It's now going global, hopefully. So watch this space. Those were some of the outputs. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, those were the major outputs for me. Also, like I said, I nearly said discipling, mentoring these students, using the Nagel project as a means to mentor and develop students in terms of the academic maturity. And the student who did his master's, he also contributed a book chapter with Chantal into the book that we eventually published. So all of that was really, I think, really exciting and generative.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing. We know that, of course, I mean, you've not exhausted, the data. You're still publishing and, tapping from the wealth of information and data you and your team had. So I'll come back to issues like that. But at this moment, I want you to look at the rear view mirror. And I'm just going to ask you, looking back to your time as a project leader retrospectively, what would you consider to be your upsides and downsides? Maybe you could give concrete example for each.
Okay, so upsides for me is definitely the communion, like I said, with fellow scholars. And then also with mentors like yourself. I called you all the elders. That was fantastic for me, So to be mentored by top African scholars, but then also to engage with fellow Africans who are basically your up and coming African scholar leaders in the world. So that for me was one of the biggest pluses. And my dean and the team, that was something that we were constantly excited about and which I will carry off in terms of evangelizing around Nagel and the benefits. In terms of downsides, look, I think with COVID was a big thing for us because at that stage we were just trying to wrap things up and then COVID came. Nelly is saying yes, but you were all very gracious, I think, in encouraging us to really just go the course. I think with any kind of project, especially with large project funding, it can become very unwieldy. And, you know, one has to really be responsible in how you spend it and communicate. And there was a certain point in time where I had to say, look, we've got this money. We didn't spend it because it was COVID. Can we allocate it here? And there was a yes, which I really appreciated. And I think that was to students' benefit, by the way. So I think that unwieldiness of managing a project, of managing timelines, you have to be very disciplined, especially as the PI. You know, managing fellow academics is often like herding cats. These were very good cats. They were quite well-behaved cats, I must say. But, you know, project leaders have to really just keep things going. And obviously sometimes just step in when people are not available and go, well, I'm going to push this thing through now and get it done. But that is just part of the course. I think reporting back, you know, all of those things, that helps to keep us on track. But of course, you know, for all of us academics, who likes admin? But I think in the end, we pulled it through. And I had a very committed team and a very supportive team, which was great.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we say in Africa that the words of our elders are words of wisdom. And I think you've graduated into becoming a Nagel elder. So I wonder what kind of words of wisdom you will share with our current grantees who are now in the last phase of their projects. They are at the phase of interpretation and analysis and dissemination. Your project was a standout, you know, just as you shared in terms of your output. So for those who are now in really coming to the last year of the project, what would be your candid advice to not just project leaders, but also team members who are here?
Sure. I think, you know, colleagues, for those of you who have supervised students at postgraduate level, and of course, all of us were at one stage also students at various levels. And you recall, as you get towards the end of that honors, master's, PhD, there's quite a bit of anxiety. I always say to my students, you're going to give birth, you know, you're very pregnant, the baby is coming. And it's kind of at that stage that one gets very anxious. So for me, I think the main advice would be stay on course as much as you can. If you go off course, don't just leave it. Get the team together again, refocus. The rewards of this thing are immeasurable if you can do it in the right way. Keep your team on board as much as you possibly can. And also, I think, you know, Nagel, because of the way that we budgeted, it offers also support to colleagues. Share the bounty, if you will, of what Nagel offers. Don't keep it for PIs. Please don't keep it just to yourself. Unless colleagues, in my case, towards the end, colleagues said, it's fine. I needed a screen. Towards the end, they said, it's fine. You can use some of the budget, which was budgeted and requested. For that, they said, no, we don't need it. But please keep communicating with your team members. Stick to your deadlines as far as you possibly can. Eat the elephant piece by piece, as we say on our continent. You know, don't worry about the whole thing. Just eat it piece by piece. And so with me, you know, it was very much, okay, student has finished, you know, data collection, tick. We've data analysis, tick. Okay, what are we going to do next? Okay, student needs to graduate master's, tick. I'm going to push for it, but you know, by this time. We have a hiccup because of this big problem within the university around race. Okay, we need to have a conversation about it. Don't avoid it. So I think it's just eating that elephant piece by piece. And when you are done, you'll see it's all gone.
No, thank you. These are the words of our elders, and I'm sure that these are really sinking in. I do have a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit that to a few, otherwise we will need another hour for questioning. So, but Let me go a little bit more specific. I wanted to ask you what dissemination strategies did you use then, but also what dissemination strategies are you using now? Might you want to speak about that?
I think this was maybe the one part where we were not as strong as some of my other colleagues. I saw that a number of them did videos and things like that. By the time we got to dissemination, it was kind of COVID time. And then I think the energy lulled. So our main dissemination was a workshop. So we had a workshop with young adults and clergy, not necessarily those that were part of the project. We cast it wider. There was about 60 to 70 of them who came on a Saturday morning and engaged with some of our findings. It was wonderful. It was from, I think, 9 in the morning to like 3 in the afternoon. We had a South African spit braai together, and also unlocked some imagination around young adults. So that was a great opportunity. For dissemination, I think that obviously there are those academic products, you know, like your articles, which we all have been posting on our research gates and our academia.edu. And then even our Nagel gatherings were opportunities for dissemination and for refinement. I think that's how Ezra connected with us. And then the book, of course, was another chance to talk about the project, to acknowledge Nagel. And also, I mean, I even think within the student's master's degree, that is disseminated. And the youth and social justice course, of course, we also prescribe some of these things as readings. So among students, there's also that dissemination. And the book itself, I feel be glad to hear Evelyn Parker, for example, you know, was very keen to prescribe the book for her course. So parts of the book is already being prescribed in various courses, including my own, but also elsewhere.
No, thank you. No, this is great. Yes, I think we encourage our colleagues to be intentional in thinking about dissemination strategies, because you want people to know what you've done, you know, what are you to be known for in and out of the project. And yes, I do have a follow-up question, which I think might also be important for current grantees. And that is the question, of course, you know that we can never exhaust the data we gather in the field. It's like thinking of going to a wine farm, which you are surrounded with, and you know, exhausting all the wine. You know, it's almost impossible. Even I know we think about one of the best wines we have enjoyed in Stellenbosch area is the Groot Constantia, you know, and everybody here, you know, we came and we almost all got nicely drunk, you know. So, so my question would be, to what extent do you continue? I mean, even at the end of your project, already a couple of years, to tap from or fall back on the data that you gathered during your time with Nagel?
That's a very good question. I think, you know, as Chantal takes it forward in partnership, the short course, I think that's going to be a key place where we might be tapping still into that data. I have now let the data rest a little bit, so it's maturing like a wine, but one also doesn't want to leave it for too long, because then it becomes outdated. So, I mean, one of the things with most of what we've written, we've focused on, or we've used sort of generated from each case study, or made sort of from the general case study, but then there's a lot more to be had within particularly the racially designated case studies around what's happening now in South Africa. So I think that would probably be kind of the next phase. And we also, in dissemination, I forgot, of course, we presented at conferences. quite a couple of times at the Chantal and I at the International Academy of Practical Theology. And then I think again at Practical Theology South Africa, we also were disseminating it via conferences. Yeah. But going forward, I think it's to do it before the data ages. I think that's a challenge for empirical researchers.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. That's very interesting. I'm going to ask you one more question before I open it up to the floor and audience. You know that Nagel is very keen on how and to what extent what we do makes sense for teaching and curriculum development. And it's very integral. And I'm wondering what you would like to share. Of course, you've talked about this partly already about your work being recommended, but again, within your project, the intentionality around teaching and curriculum development, how did you navigate this, and what did you think came out, particularly within your department and university, or perhaps around South Africa, in terms of teaching and curriculum development?
This is a question for Chantal. She used to be the chair of that. No, so I must say, if you ask about challenges, I think this is one of the things, because as we know, curriculum development processes have a cycle. And when we were applying, I believe we were doing a parallel process, Chantal could correct me, but we were doing a parallel process of curriculum review of our Bachelor of Theology at the same time. And that process was already running. And we were like, what happens now? And that's where we said, well, actually, yes, we have courses in youth work and community development, but we don't really have anything in the social justice and young adults. And this particular course was also a way for us to connect with church communities, with faith-based communities in a different way. We had just come off the back of widespread student protests called initially Roads Must Fall and Fees Must Fall. So the notion of young adults and social justice was very key in people's heads. But faith communities, what was evident from our findings of our research was that faith communities were not really engaging very well with this issue. And so instead of trying to see how we fit, we said, let's create a separate package, a separate curriculum that addresses this need that we're seeing coming out of our data into the community. And so that short course, we ran it with some money, and now, like I said, it will hopefully go global. There's interest in Scotland and interest in the US in terms of some kind of hybrid cohorts. We ran it hybrid. It was still COVID. They had some contact weeks. So I think that was initially a challenge, but it actually turned into a win. And it became one of our short course offerings within the Faculty of Theology.
No, fantastic. No, thank you, Nadine, for sharing this. And I'm sure that the audience would have quite a lot of, questions or interactions with you. But let me say that as we move to the Q&A segment, beware that we are in an age of artificial intelligence, and questions around identity theft are prevalent. So for the audience, if you don't mind, show your face if you like, except you are allergic to people seeing your picture. And then you have a good time to interact with Nadine. But just to start to get that rolling, I would like to perhaps invite Chantal, if there are things you want to add, but if you also want to contradict Nadine to say, no, you got it wrong. So Chantal, would you like to get us started in terms of the Q&A? Sorry, I just jumped on you without...
Afternoon, colleagues. And yeah, I'm just a guest, man. I don't know why Nadine's pulling me into this. She is my elder, so I'm just here to listen. But great to be with you guys. I think, yeah, amazing project. I think the only thing I would possibly add is, yeah, so she spoke about the curriculum development part, which we didn't get into the main curriculum, for lack of a better term. It is there in different spheres, in her modules, in my modules. But the short course is actually quite integral at this season of higher education. Not everyone's going to do a full degree. And so that's why we're continuing now to see how we can get it out even better. The short course is still very critical. It's the only challenge to getting it out has been funding. So Nagel helped us with funding to get people into the program. We have now applied again for another funding grant to get people into the program. So the content of this short course is phenomenal. It's life-changing for us as those who've been involved in it, but for those who've been cohorts already. So that is still definitely relevant, and that's why we're pushing as far as we go to get that as part of our offering, but not as a degree. I think a short course is far more accessible and much more widely able to be used in terms of higher education standards and rules and stuff like that. So just to double click on that, it's definitely still relevant, and we are pushing on a project for that. I do agree, the type of students we had, we were lucky to have a strong student cohort, independent group of young adults themselves who were engaged with the communities we were engaged with. And so, yeah, they definitely taught us a lot, even in terms of just hierarchies in how we approach empirical research. That we reflected quite a bit on that, and language and gestures in doing the empirical work. They taught us much. But yeah, I hope that helps. Definitely appreciative of the project itself for a time in our faculty journey with regards to fees must fall in South Africa. It just came at the right time, and it was quite valuable in terms of getting these students' voices engaged in a more concrete and systematized way.
No, thank you, Chantel, for those insights, and thanks for joining us today. And I'm sure that if some of these reflections are very important for us. So if you've not filled this survey, we would be in touch with you momentarily to kind of unleash that experience for us in the survey. Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Stay on, because there might be another question for you if Nadine is getting jittery, with answers. So now this is opened up. If you like to make a comment or ask a question or an observation, this is the time to speak or forever be quiet. So let me know either by indicating through the chat, or just raise your hand or show your picture and say, I must speak now. Yes, so if you don't ask questions, then I will ask you.
I can go.
Okay, thank you, Damari.
Yeah. Not sure that it's a question, but just really deep appreciation for today's conversation and for Nadine specifically. I think one of the things that we don't speak much about when we have these webinars is just how Nagel has enabled us to meet, forge relationships and networks and collaborations. And I just want to share this, and I hope I'm not putting her on the spot, that I felt that I gained a really great sister and friend through the Nagel Institute.
Amen.
And we've been having a really great conversation. Unfortunately, I was not able to contribute to her book chapter, but I'm just really so grateful that I met her and feel that she's a gift, and that it enlarged my my networks, and she and I have lots in common because we engage quite a lot with community work. And I was just really struck about your project on young adults and social justice in South Africa. And probably this is not something that Nagel ever envisioned when they send out these calls. Just the ability of these projects to have great theological impact at community level and inspiring great theological conversations around issues that we care about. For you, young adults and social justice in South Africa, for me, gender and faith and gender equality. And I just wanted to say that it would sort of like reframing it back to you. Do you really think that these unintended consequences should then be one of our objectives to think around theological research and community impact? So it's not really a question, but just a conversation starter. I'm just thinking, coming in, trying to find out my niche also, that I was just very interested with the work that you are doing with young adults and the kind of theological conversation that Nagel has enabled people to create and talk to each other about, various things.
No, thanks, Damaris. Damaris and I call each other sister profs, and we really need more of that on our continent, just, to encourage each other. I think Nagel for me has also been a space of encouragement and growth. And a lot of that happens through relationship, who you meet and who you connect with. So for me, that has been, one of the highlights personally, is meeting people like you, Afe, Nelly, and so forth. There's a question on the chat around, maybe which connects, Damaris, with what you were asking.
Yes, I wanted Florence. Yeah. Florence, would you show yourself and pose your question directly? Florence, are you there? Okay.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone from here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for the talk on social justice and so on. I just wanted to have more information about social justice, especially in churches, small churches around us. They so much depend on their pastor who doesn't really have so much to give to them. And then maybe they just feel the pastor is favoring some section of the church, whereas they are left out. I just need clarification on how to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Florence. Yeah.
Thanks.
Florence, as I understand it, it is maybe a more practical question. But I do think as theological educators, we have the opportunity, and theological education, yes, can happen formally within universities or seminaries, but even through these kind of short courses or even feedback sessions, where you're conscientizing people as to what are the key issues of injustice in a particular community or even in a nation. In fact, Damaris and I, how we connected was through an ex-student of mine, who Damaris also mentors, who runs a faith-based organization called Msingi in Nairobi, which looks at training pastors, the ones that you're talking about now, in terms of getting them to understand a biblical perspective on issues of justice. And I think many of our churches have been more influenced by Western Christianity that says, no, God is just interested in your soul, not the rest, not the physical, not the political, not the economic. And so I think, some of that we can do as theologians, also in terms of our community engagement. Damaris and I have that in common, I think, our passion for engaging with faith-based communities, sometimes in the public sphere, through, I know Damaris writes opinion pieces and things like that, in things like feedback sessions, in workshops, and also, I think, through friendships with clergy. So I think there are many different ways in which we can engage clergy to think about the gospel as holistic, for example, in this case.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nadine. I do know that the topic of social justice is one of Telesia's passion. Telesia, would you unmute and, say what you wanted to say briefly? Telesia?
Thank you so much, Prof. I think, thank you, Nadine, for the insightful speech, and I really appreciate your work. And one is on the short course, because it's always good to know that you're reaching out to people in a very informal way, but then impactful, and really liking the context with which you're coming in, and really utilizing that for the benefit of everybody else, and not taking your privileged position and leaving everybody behind. I really like that. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Telesia. Even though you didn't want to let us see that it's not identity theft. Yeah. So yes, any more questions or comments? Please, the floor is open. I see Henrietta is here. Would you want to share any ideas from the wine country as a neighbor to Nadine?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Trust we are all doing fine. Hi, Nadine. Well, I think I particularly like your idea of the simulation. Even we are also in the process of completing an edited volume from our work, and been so fortunate to have people across the globe. So we try to see that our book represents the various continents. So it doesn't only speak to South Africa, but also speak to the issue of xenophobia across the world. And that has been done. And I think while we aimed for that, it also delayed our book because we intentionally wanted to see the book well represented in this sphere. So I really would say congratulations that we pulled that through. And I really, my team and I, we are working hard to see that our book also comes out. We are aiming for the latest March next year. We've had almost all the articles, we've reviewed them, and we are on course to do that. So it's a journey that never ends. And still, we have so much data that we are mining from. I plan to do a paper with Nats, our PI, and hopefully the three of us will do another paper. So I think this is one of the things that Nagel has done, giving one the opportunity to amass data that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do that, to have this repository of data that you constantly work on, navigate your way through. And I would really want to encourage current grantees to store their data jealously, because that is something that you constantly come back to. Even when you get fresh data from another project, you would see the need to do comparative research by falling back onto your previous data. So it's something that you have to set up those repositories, not only for yourself, but have a repository in a way that other members of your team put their data into that repository and everyone can tap into. And I'll give you just a quick example. We are currently on a project that involves about 100 researchers, and we have a data repository that I am able to go into that repository and look at the data that is coming in from Brazil, data that is coming in from Haiti or from Ethiopia. And I use the data to write as if I was there. And if there is anything to corroborate, I then speak with the researcher. And I think that is something, this is an innovative way of doing research that we should all embrace, rather than allowing ChatGPT to do it for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elder Henrietta. I also wanted to point out that Chantel had an additional comment. She says, another highlight was getting to read our fellow African scholars, there's much to engage with. And I think this is very important to think about. All right, so as we continue, I know that Okello is very keen to share some insights, as well as Joyce. So Okello first. Feel free, it could be a question or it could just be a comment. Okay, I think he's still thinking. Joyce, do you want to comment with any, what are you taking home from this conversation, if there's any? Okay, so well, as they are still thinking, there's a question from Felicity. Would you unmute and convey your question? Let's see you if you can.
Yeah, that's fine. Good afternoon from Ghana. Nadine, thank you so much for walking us through the action steps that emerged from your project in terms of practice and scholarship. I'm just curious to know why it is important for you as a person to tell the story. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Felicity. Afi, can I go ahead?
Yes,
so,
please.
That is a very practical theological question. Look, I think it's important to share always with colleagues, with students, your learnings. We need to be, you know, the role of story is sometimes underestimated in Western scholarship. We know in our context that we are shaped by stories. We carry stories within us. And then when it gets to scholarly endeavors, like this one, sharing in various ways, or even our writing, we sometimes leave it behind. And so for me, storytelling is very, very important. Not only so that those that come behind us can listen and learn from the stories, but we also process and even drink from our own wells and our own wisdom around what we've learned, so that when we go ahead, we don't make the same mistakes, and we also see, you know, how we've done things in the past. So I think we need to tell stories more. We know it exists within us as Africans. We shouldn't be shy to do that, whether it's on platforms like this or even within our own scholarly work, and continue to encourage each other with stories of success and stories of challenge. I like the fact, Afi, that you didn't only ask about the good things, but also what were the challenges. Yeah, so that we can learn together. And I think that's why, you know, I didn't hesitate to say yes to doing this kind of thing. It's also a chance for me to reflect on my own story and learn going forward. Thanks.
No, thank you, Nadine, for emphasizing the importance of storytelling. If you don't tell your story, you give space for other people to tell it for you, and by telling your story for you, they will either, you know, mutilate it or undercut it. So it's important for us to tell our stories. And on that note, let me say we do still have a couple of minutes to have conversation. So, but I would like to invite Edith, if you would like to speak, either a question or a comment, and then perhaps after work, if you are there, you could support Edith. Edith, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Trying to show up my face. If it doesn't show, please blame it on the camera.
Thank you.
We can see you. We can see you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nadine, for the presentation. I was actually really caught up by the area of the curriculum, because it's one of the areas that we are struggling with from this part of the world. there's a lot of bureaucracy that we have to really get through and many walls that we are hitting. But it's encouraging to know that we don't necessarily just have to mainstream it within our curriculum, that we can also put up modules and short courses. So for me, that was quite insightful, and I'm grateful for all the learnings that I am gleaning from all these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Nadine, feel free if you want to have a further comment, or otherwise we can move on here.
I think, you know, with these short courses, don't see it as a quick out. I think for us, it developed into so much more. Even though at the beginning, like you, we were completely stumped how we're going to do this. But one of the things that we committed to is access. And it goes back to also the engagement with communities, with local pastors, with local people. And I think that sometimes, especially universities, sometimes also seminaries, we become so distant from the people that we're serving and the communities that we're serving. And this is also one other way to, I think, to see it as serving the needs of faith communities and of society broader. So I think that's really what it's become for us. Maybe at the time we were like, oh, we're just nervous. How are we going to do it? Oh, we'll do it, you know, on the side. But in the end, it's become so much more than that. So I would just encourage you around that, and also around thinking of how to serve our faith communities in a way that allows more access. The course is accredited. So we had the choice to have non-credit bearing or credit bearing. We went for the credit bearing option. So they do get not only a certificate of completion, but they also get some credits. And I think in a country where access to tertiary education is sometimes a huge thing, this is also a way of allowing people access into a space that they often can't access, or they feel too intimidated, or they don't have, you know, all the qualifications or time to do a degree.
No, thank you, Nadine. I know that Afewok and Paul are competing to say something. So if I go by alphabetical order, Afewok, would you want to go first? I thought you were trying to take Paul's space. So Paul, would you rather go first if you want? Okay, now here Joyce is coming. Yeah, let's make good use of the last few minutes we have. Okay, anyone else who would like to chip in a question? Lydia, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so would you give it a shot?
Yes, sure. Yeah, several insightful things, but maybe just one of my topmost takeouts is how Nadine and her team were very intentional in investing in mentorship, working with younger colleagues. So she says how they fed from more experienced scholars like you, but at the same time, they were also impacting younger ones. So I just see a beautiful chain of enriching each other, you know, that moves back and forth. So for me, that's a takeout that we could learn and, yeah, emulate in these and even other projects that we are involved in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I think that is a very salient point you've made. I'm sure that Fancy would echo that. Fancy, would you echo that?
Yes, Prof. I think I would echo what Lydia is saying, and I love the idea of the short course. I was just wondering, the other day we're doing some interfaith dialogue, and I realized that some other institutions are doing this. How I wish this can be possible even at public universities like where we are. I really love it, and thank you, Nadine, for sharing your story. It's quite encouraging, and we are growing and looking forward to interacting more with you and the others. Thank you very much. Sorry, my camera is not working. I don't know why.
Okay, thank you. We heard you loud and clear. Nadine, any follow-up commentary on that? Otherwise, we move on to the next.
Sure. I think, you know, we really have to also be thinking about developing the next generation of African scholars. So Nagel is investing in us and also, I think, in the future. And that's one of the things we need to take this opportunity. It's quite a bit of money that we can make go far. So let's also not just keep it to ourselves. Yes, it's there to stimulate us and so forth as established scholars, but let's look at ways in which we can capacitate and encourage our students to become the next generation of scholars. And I can tell you my dean is very positive about the Nagel project and the opportunities that it's provided also for students. So please, colleagues, don't keep it to yourself. Look at how we can develop the next generation, make them part of it. Yes, it takes a little bit more time and it takes a little bit more commitment to do that, but it's well worth it when you see 5-6 years down the line they're registering for their PhDs.
No, thank you, Nadine. Chantel, would you want to come up and maybe echo what you've just said, and perhaps Marcelo would have something to chip in?
Yeah, I'm just curious. It sounds like most people are, interested in the notion of a short course. And I'm just wondering, would it be something that, would be relevant to this Nagel cohort, how it will look? I have no idea. I'm asking an open-ended question here because, obviously it's been created for a specific context, but I wonder if that's something Nagel could consider in terms of future, that there is this cohort on a short course specifically focusing on, in our case, social justice in young adults.
No, thank you, Chantel. I think that is important to think with. Sorry, Joy, that you could not join us fully because of internet connectivity, but be reminded that this is recorded, so you will have access to the full recording afterwards. So I'm looking at my watch. We would end exactly in 5 minutes. But I wondered if Marcelo or Rudolph have anything to say, to add, or a question to ask Nadine, just as we wrap up.
Oh,
yes.
Okay, well, go ahead.
No,
okay, Marcelo and then Rudolph. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just a quick one. And considering that this is the Youth Month, and I think this is a very good discussion that we're having today. Well, tomorrow we are celebrating Youth Day. But one of my greatest challenges has always been looking at how youth looks at inequalities that are happening in our countries and the relationship. And most of what I've seen, our youth has actually separated themselves from the inequalities and developed their own small theological world where they live, and the inequalities are something that is different. And I wanted to find out how, with your work, were you able to join the youth and to make them see that we live in a world where there are inequalities, but when I've seen them, even in our churches, everywhere you go, they seem to be far away from what is happening around them. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcelo. Yes, Nadine, would you?
So what we found is youth are actually very aware of the inequalities. Unfortunately, churches are places where those things are spiritualized away. And some of the youth were saying, look, we're aware of what's going on here. Everybody knows, but our churches are not engaging us on these issues. And part of what we saw, Masila, you will know, during Fees Must Fall, is a lot of the Fees Must Fall activists were actually Christians. Our country is, like most of the continent, very religious. But they could not find a home, a spiritual home, with regards to some of these issues. And then many of them just decided, I'll just leave the church. It doesn't have anything to say. So I think youth are very aware. Churches are often not. Churches are places of what did Karl Marx say, the opium of the people, like a drug. And we need to be helping our church leaders as well to understand these issues from a theological perspective. And I think that's the task of theologians, of seminaries, of universities today. We need to be engaging those issues and really yeah, where we can, so that we don't have a anesthetized generation.
No, thank you. Perhaps our last intervention will be from Rudolph.
Oh, thank you, Prof. I think I also missed the earlier presentation because of a prior engagement. But listen to the interactions, two things that I'm picking: the idea of story, telling story, and why you are telling it. And then also the idea of the short courses from the because sometimes you feel you're running with some relatively old curriculum. So reviewing might be a bit of a journey in itself, but the idea of a short course, I think, is something that I'm thinking and critically think about. So thank you. It's good to be here and to see other colleagues.
Yes. Thank you. To see you, Rudolph. Yes, thank you, Rudolph. I think I aim that will end, on the dot in 1 minute. So I would like to invite the Nagel director to say a few words of appreciation to our guest speaker, and then we close.
Oh, you ambushed me, but thank you. Thank you, colleagues. First of all, my thanks goes to my sister professor, Nadine Bowers. Thank you so much for this interesting, thought-provoking presentation. I think it has resonated with very many people, particularly the issue of short courses, and I think that is something that Nagel will take note. And thank you just for having this conversation and encouraging our grantees, both future and those ones who are coming in the near future. We are just so grateful that you found the time. I know you've been in Korea. It was so tiresome, I could see, but that you found time to be with us today. Thank you for your generosity of sharing with us today. And for the rest of our participants who joined us so graciously, we thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. We cannot hold this without you. You are the audience that we need, and you are the people that are going to speak about Nagel Institute to everyone. And Nelly and Nebundo and Afe, thank you for your amazing organization of these seminars. We are grateful. And on behalf of Nagel, I think I'll stop there, but thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar, September 14.